Adjunct Professor Moran, Microeconomics 112. In the last sessions, we were discussing pure competition. Pure competition is the best for society. It results in both allocative efficiency, the mix of goods and services most desired by society, and productive efficiency, the production of goods and services at least cost method. In this unit, we're going to discuss pure monopoly, which is the worst for society. The problem with pure competition is it's extremely uncommon if it exists at all because of the assumptions for pure competition. You're going to assume that there are many buyers and sellers all acting independently, that there are no barriers to entry. Think about how expensive it is to open up a business, and you begin to see that there are often barriers to entry. We assume that there's no cost to information. Well, every time you see an advertisement for a product, that means that there is a cost to information and that consumers are not necessarily fully informed. So pure competition is an ideal that we want to achieve and may never achieve. So we need to know how far businesses are performing away from pure competition to see if perhaps what the price quantity outcomes are that are worst for society, and then if necessary for government involvement in the market. So we're going to discuss how monopolists determine price and quantity, and we're going to have to study how a monopolist can be a price setter and what that means for his demand curves. We'll first discuss some of the characteristics of a monopolist. There's a single seller. The firm and industry demand curves are the same. There are no close substitutes. The monopolist sells a unique product. The monopolist is a price maker. By controlling supply, the monopolist can walk up and down the demand curve and find the price-quantity combination that results in the greatest profit for him, the monopolist. There are barriers to entry. There must be something preventing other firms from entering into this market. It could be economies of scale, something we talked about when we discussed long-run cost curves, that if minimally efficient scale, the lowest point at which a company produces, happens at a great number of outputs, for example, at coincidentally the amount demanded in the market, then that will be considered a natural monopolist. Other things that can give a firm a monopoly is technology. Legally a patent, for example. So Bill Gates has a patent and a legal monopoly on Windows. A patent is a government-issued monopoly to an inventor lasting 20 years, and the government does that in order to encourage innovation. If someone invented something and others could make cheap knockoffs of it, there would be no incentive to develop new products to make society better. So the government gives patents to monopolists and gives them a 20-year monopoly. Licenses. The government issues licenses like the Federal Communication Commission and TVs. Cabs are issued licenses by the government. You could have exclusive ownership of a resource. So at one time, Nickel Company of California owned 90% of all nickel reserves, which gives them a virtual monopoly. Monopolists will often engage in non-price competition. So the electric company is not going to offer you lower prices, but when they send you advertisements, when they send you your bill, there'll be advertisements in there for how to get ready for a hurricane, for example. So they will specialize more in public relations. And non-price competition from Microsoft Windows, for example, is based on product attributes which other competitors won't have. Okay, examples include gas, electric, water, and cable companies. There are near monopolies like Intel, which makes the chips for your computers. There is a smaller competitor called AMD, but Intel's a virtual monopoly. Whammo, believe it or not, all the flying discs in the country are virtually Whammo. There are a few ones that are not owned by Whammo, but a very small part of the market. And De Beers with diamonds. Now, De Beers isn't exactly a monopoly, but they have a tremendous controlled supply, and so there will be a lot of price leadership on the part of other smaller producers and sellers of diamonds, and they'll follow De Beers' lead. Sports monopolies. NFL and Major League Baseball, those monopolies, they'll give a team, as a group, they'll give teams a monopoly within a certain area. The demand for monopolist is downward sloping, which has three implications. This is very unlike pure competition. When we discussed pure competition, we discovered that the purely competitive firm has a perfectly elastic demand curve, although the market has a negative slope demand curve. So if you remember, this is a pure competitor. This is the market, or the industry, and this is the individual firm. The market has a negative slope demand curve, and that will set the equilibrium price. The pure competitor has to sell at that price. This is price, if you remember, will equal demand equals marginal revenue equals average revenue, and equals, you set all of that equal to marginal cost, and that's where this firm will produce its price quantity combination. Alright, this is perfectly elastic. The firm has to charge that price, and in theory can sell as much or as little as it wants, but it will profit maximize where it sets price equals to marginal cost. So its goal is not to sell an unlimited amount, but to sell the amount that maximizes profit or minimizes loss. But the monopolist actually sees this downward sloping demand curve in the markets. It's the only firm in the market. The demand curve for the firm, the monopolist, is the same as the industry demand curve. Now, if a monopolist wants to sell more, he's got to lower his price. So let's do a monopolist curve. So now this is both the firm and the market or industry. This is monopolist. Because the monopolist is the only company in the industry, he sees the negative sloping demand curve of the market. In order to sell more, he has to lower his price. There's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. If he raises his price, he'll know he'll lose quantity sold. What that means is that there's going to be a difference between price and marginal revenue, which did not exist for the pure competitor. For a pure competitor, price equals marginal revenue. If the price is $10 for a pure competitor, price 1, 2, 3, 4. Price. Let's say price is 10 for each, right? 10, and quantity is 1, 2, 3, 4. Then his total revenue is price times quantity is 10, 20, 30, 40. His marginal revenue is 10, 10, and 10. Here you can see that price is equal to marginal revenue. That's not true. That happens because the pure competitor has a perfectly elastic demand curve. But that's not true for a monopolist who has a negative sloping demand curve. So let's take an example where the firm wants to sell 0 to 5 out units. If the monopolist sells his product at 172, he won't sell any units. If he lowers his price to 162, he sells one, and his total revenue is 162. His marginal revenue is 162. 162 minus 0. To sell more, the monopolist has to further lower his price to 152. Now he sells 2 units. 2 times 152 gives total revenue of 304. 304 minus 162 gives you a marginal revenue of only 142. To sell more, he lowers his price further, maybe to 142. 3 times 142 gives you total revenue of 426. 426 minus 304 gives you your marginal revenue of 122. 3 to 4, lower price of 132. 528 total revenue minus prior total revenue at 3 units gives you marginal revenue of 102. 5 units, he lowers his price to 122. 5 times 122, 610. 610 minus 128 is 82. From this, we want to really conclude that price is no longer equal to marginal revenue, that price is greater than marginal revenue, except for the first unit where they'll be equal. So for the pure competitor, this identity no longer holds. Price is greater than marginal revenue. Why is marginal revenue greater than price? Less than price and marginal revenue. Okay. Why is marginal revenue less than price? When a pure monopolist wants to sell more, he's got to lower his price. But he doesn't lower his price just on the next one sold. He has to lower his price on all the prior ones. It's not like one guy gets online and then he lowers the price to the next guy, and another guy gets on and lowers the next to the guy next line. These decisions are made at corporate headquarters in advance of sales, and they have to say, well, we want to sell 3 units. What price do we need to make the product to sell 3 units? 142. We want to sell 5 units. What's our price going to be? 122. So when they are calculating these price, total revenue, and marginal revenue tables, in order to sell more, they have to lower the price on all of them. So if we look, if the firm only wants to sell 2, then they only have to take a loss of 10 on the first one. If they want to sell 3, they have to take a loss on the first one, second one, and another on the next one. If they're selling on 132, it's 10 minus 10 minus 10 minus 10 on 162, 10, 10, 10 on 152, 10 and 10 on 142. At 4 units, 10 on 132. And so this explains why marginal revenue is going to be less than price. Because at this price, they're reducing the price on all the prior units that they could have sold at a higher unit, at a higher price. Note, the lost revenue at each new price is not from the original price discounted. All prior demand point prices become the last higher price. For example, at 3 units, 142 in revenue per unit, but less than 10 off the 162, but was discounted at 152 at 2 units. The relationship between quantity demanded at each price equals the demand curve. Price and quantity is the demand curve. By deciding on one of the many possible outputs, the monopolist is indirectly determining price. The monopolist can walk up and down. The monopolist can adjust his price to any one of these prices to sell that quantity, which will result in his total revenue. And when we subtract out his cost, will determine profit. Lost men are shut down. Okay, the monopolist is going to end up setting its price in the elastic range of the demand curve. Keep in mind, when price is increasing, total revenue is decreasing. When price and total revenue move the opposite ways, we discussed this in the chapter on supply and demand, that's elastic. If price is decreasing, total revenue is increasing. This is where the monopolist will set his price in the elastic range. The monopolist will not set his price in the inelastic range. And eventually we're going to graph this and it'll become more apparent. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do a problem on this to demonstrate these concepts of price being greater than marginal revenue.